What if I told you that someone once won a poker tournament without looking at their cards even once? An 18-year-old girl walks into the most prestigious poker event in Europe, surrounded by legends who've been grinding the game since before she was born. She's never played a single live hand in her life, yet somehow she's about to make history that will leave the poker world questioning everything they thought they knew. So how does a Norwegian teenager with zero life experience outsmart the most dangerous minds in poker? Well, to understand that, we need to go back to where it all began. Her journey had been unconventional from the very beginning, but her focus was always on one single thing: understanding people. Her father had taught her basic stud poker when she was young, but what he couldn't have known was that he was unleashing something extraordinary. At 15, when most kids were begging their parents for allowance money, Annette created an account on online poker platforms under the name Annette_15. But here's the thing that separated her from every other wannabe poker player. She never deposited a single cent. Instead, she did something that would become legendary in poker circles. She built her entire bankroll from absolute zero, grinding free roll tournaments where the prize was real money, but the entry was completely free. While other players saw these as waste of time beginner games, Annette saw them as her laboratory, her chance to study human behavior without risking anything. Furthermore, she was developing something that money couldn't buy: an almost supernatural ability to read people through their betting patterns, their timing, their digital tells that most players didn't even know they had. By the time she was 16, she had turned those worthless free roll entries into thousands of dollars. What's more, she had cracked the code that would make her unstoppable. But the poker world was about to witness something that defied all logic. What truly separated Annette from every other online grinder was what happened in July 2007. While most players were obsessing over starting hand charts and probability calculations, Annette decided to prove that poker wasn't really about the cards at all. She entered a $4 buy-in, 180-player sit-and-go tournament on PokerStars with one catch that would become the stuff of poker legend. She played the entire tournament without looking at her hole cards. Not once. Not until the very end, when she peeked at them in a single difficult decision. She won the entire tournament playing completely blind, using nothing but position, betting patterns, and her ability to read the rhythm of the game. When word of this spread through poker forums, it was absolute madness. It shouldn't have been possible, but there was the proof. This wasn't just showing off. This was Annette announcing to the poker world that while they were all playing checkers, she was playing chess 3 moves ahead. The poker establishment was about to get a rude awakening. However, there was still one massive obstacle standing in her way that would change everything. Here's where the story gets even more remarkable. While Annette was demolishing fields online, she was trapped by one simple fact: you had to be 21 to play live poker tournaments in the United States. For most young players, this would have been a devastating roadblock. But Annette's Norwegian passport gave her something else entirely: access to European tournaments where the legal age was 18. When the World Series of Poker announced their first ever European Championship in London with a £10,000 buy-in, Annette didn't hesitate. She had the bankroll, she had the skills, but most importantly, she had something that terrified the old guard. She had absolutely nothing to lose. At 18 years and 364 days old, literally one day before her 19th birthday, Annette walked into the Empire Casino in London's Leicester Square. She sat down at a table filled with poker legends, bracelet winners, and professionals who had been grinding live tournaments since before she was born. But here's what they didn't know. This quiet Norwegian teenager had already played more hands of poker than most of them would play in their entire careers. She had seen every bluff, every betting pattern, every tell that existed in the digital realm. Additionally, she was about to find out if it translated to the felt. What happened next would leave jaws on the floor. What happened over the next 4 days was nothing short of surgical precision disguised as teenage fearlessness. While seasoned pros were playing it safe, calculating pot odds and managing their images, Annette was playing pure, aggressive poker based on reads that seemed to come from another dimension. She built massive stacks with moves that made no sense to traditional poker wisdom, but perfect sense to someone who understood the game at a deeper level. When she 3-bet with suited connectors, it wasn't gambling, it was calculated aggression designed to put maximum pressure on opponents who were used to playing against predictable patterns. The most remarkable thing wasn't just that she was winning, it was how she was winning. She made a move with 7-2 offsuit, literally the worst starting hand in poker, and turned it into a massive pot. She wasn't just playing her cards, she was playing the entire table like a symphony conductor, orchestrating every bet, every fold, every decision to her advantage. The old-timers were starting to sweat. Nevertheless, the real test was still ahead, as the field narrowed to players who had every reason to believe they would outlast this unknown teenager. By the time the tournament reached the final two tables, Anett was up against the cream of the crop. John Tabatabai, a respected professional with years of experience. Kenny Tran, a feared tournament grinder. Other legends who had dominated poker long before this Norwegian kid had even learned the rules. But then something extraordinary happened. Anett's stack, which had been commanding all tournament, suddenly took a massive hit. Most young players would have panicked, would have tightened up, would have played scared poker waiting for premium hands. Instead, Anett did what only a true champion would do. She went to war. She cold-shoved AK suited over two bets, a move that would have been considered suicide by conservative players but was actually perfect given the situation. She knocked out Kenny Tran with that hand, and in doing so, she sent a message to the entire table. This wasn't luck. This wasn't beginner's fortune. This was pure poker mastery. The most telling moment came when she shoved with a small pocket pair against significant action. It was a move that required ice in her veins and complete confidence in her read, and she was right, again. Yet the ultimate showdown was still waiting, and it would make poker history. When it came down to heads-up play, Anett faced John Tabatabai with everything on the line. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. On one side, a seasoned professional with years of live tournament experience; on the other, a teenager who had never played a live hand of poker before this tournament. In the final hand, Anett held pocket sevens against Tabatabai's 5-6. When the river card fell, it was over. But here's what made the moment even more remarkable. Anett barely reacted. No celebration, no emotion, just the quiet confidence of someone who had known this moment was inevitable. She had just become the youngest person ever to win a World Series of Poker bracelet, earning £1 million, the largest single event payout for a female player at the time. Furthermore, she did it all one day before her 19th birthday. The poker world would never recover from what they had just witnessed. Anett's victory wasn't just a tournament win, it was a seismic shift that cracked the foundation of professional poker. The old guard, who had dismissed online players as computer jockeys who couldn't handle the pressure of live play, suddenly realized they had been living in the past. She had proven that the internet wasn't just breeding casual players, it was creating killers. Quiet ones who could read souls through betting patterns. Analytical ones who could calculate odds faster than you could blink. And most terrifyingly for the establishment, teenage ones who had no fear because they had nothing to lose. The poker world would never be the same. Anett had opened the floodgates for a new generation of players who would dominate the game for the next decade. However, her own journey was about to take an unexpected turn that nobody saw coming. Over the following years, Anett continued to cash in major live events, accumulating nearly $4 million in tournament earnings. But unlike many poker players who get trapped in the grind, Anett had something more valuable: perspective. As the poker boom cooled and the fields became tougher, Anett began questioning everything. Was this really how she wanted to spend her 20s? Sitting in smoky casinos, playing the same psychological warfare day after day? The game that had once excited her was starting to feel like a prison. The breaking point came gradually. Tournament after tournament, she found herself going through the motions. The passion that had driven her to greatness was fading. She realized that poker had given her everything she needed from it: fame, fortune, and proof that she could conquer any challenge. And yet, just as she reached the height of her powers, she felt like she couldn't breathe. The decision to step away wasn't easy. Millions on the line, and you just leave? How do you abandon the thing that made you famous? But Anett understood something that most poker players never figure out. Knowing when to quit is the ultimate skill. In a move that surprised the poker world, Anett gradually stepped away from the spotlight. She began streaming on YouTube, not poker content, but makeup tutorials. She entered Scrabble competitions. She was building a life beyond the felt, something that many poker professionals never managed to do. Yet her impact on the game remained undeniable. What she had accomplished would echo through poker history forever. But there's one final truth that explains everything. Anett Oberstad didn't just win a bracelet, she rewrote the rules of poker before she was even old enough to play in most casinos. Her victory at the World Series of Poker Europe wasn't just a triumph of talent over experience, but a signal to the entire poker world that the game had changed. She proved that poker wasn't about age, bravado, or even the cards in your hand. It was about understanding people, reading patterns, and having the nerve to trust your instincts under pressure. She didn't need to see her cards to beat you. because she wasn't playing the cards. She was playing you. She showed that fearlessness, intelligence, and emotional insight could beat decades of experience. And sometimes the most dangerous player at the table is the one with nothing to lose and everything to prove.